Your 30s will be the richest decade of your life so far, and also the decade you'll have the least to show for it. Both things are true at the same time. And the collision between them decides everything that comes after. Keep two people in mind while I walk through this. Marin and Derek, same street, same $78,000 salary, same $11,000 in savings, same student loan they'd both quietly stopped opening emails about. At 65, Marin is deciding whether Tuesday is a golf day. Derek is still setting an alarm. Not because he loves the work, but because the math never closed. It wasn't luck. Neither of them inherited a dime. It wasn't the market, because they rode the same index fund through the same crashes. And it wasn't income, because Derek out-earned her almost every single year after 38. It was one decade, a window that opened at 30 and quietly shut at 40, and neither of them heard it close. My name is Yank, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of my life staring at spreadsheets so that you don't have to. Today I'm opening that window and walking you through it. And if you've ever felt like you work harder than you did at 25 and somehow have less, stick around, because that feeling isn't a character flaw. It's a scheduling problem, and I can prove it with arithmetic. 3 forces are working on you during this decade. I'll name them now so you can watch them operate. The squeeze, which explains why the money isn't there. The halving, which explains why the money you don't save now costs double later. And the line of sight, which is the one nobody warns you about, and the one that actually got Derek. 2 things I want you to hold on to as we go. There's 1 month in Derek's 30s, one completely ordinary month where he made 2 reasonable decisions, not stupid ones, reasonable, that ended up costing him more than 20 years of white-knuckle catch-up ever gave back. I'll give you the exact number. And there's 1 afternoon in Marin's 30s that took about 15 minutes. I'll tell you what she did at the end, and I want you to notice how aggressively boring it is. Let's start with where you actually stand, because the number in your head is almost certainly wrong, and it's wrong in a specific direction. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances puts the median net worth of an American household under 35 at $39,000. The average is $183,000. Sit with that gap, because it's the single most useful thing in this whole video. The average is nearly 5 times the median. That's not a rounding difference. That's a handful of extremely wealthy households standing on the scale while you try to weigh yourself. The median is you, the person in the middle. The average is a room where one guy sold a startup and 49 people are splitting a burrito, divided by 50, then handed to you as your benchmark. And you've spent your whole adult life comparing yourself to the guy who sold the startup. So from here on, when I give you a median, that's you. When I give you an average, that's the burrito room. Vanguard reports that if you're between 25 and 34, your median retirement balance is about $16,000, and the average is about $42,000. Between 35 and 44, the median is around $40,000 and the average is around $76,000. And roughly half of households under 35 have no retirement account at all, not a small one, none. So if you have anything at all, you're already ahead of a coin flip. Now, the squeeze. Your 30s are the decade where every major expense in a human life shows up at once and parks itself in your driveway. Childcare runs about $1,230 a month for center-based infant care. In 45 states, plus the District of Columbia, care for 2 children costs more than your annual mortgage payment. Your kids cost more than your house. And child care prices rose about 29% between 2020 and 2024, while overall inflation rose about 22%. So the thing eating your paycheck got worse faster than everything else that was already getting worse. Your student loans are still there, patiently waiting. Borrowers in their 30s hold about 1/3 of all student debt in America, with an average balance north of $40,000. You didn't outrun it in your 20s. It moved in with you. Your down payment became a 30s problem too. The National Association of Realtors put the median first-time buyer's age at 40 last year. I want to be straight with you, though, because that number is contested. The Mortgage Bankers Association and the New York Fed, working from much bigger data sets, put it closer to 32 or 33. The direction is real, the headline is disputed. Either way, it's your problem now, and it was your parents' problem a decade earlier in their lives, and your parents are getting older, and the phone calls start changing tone. You know the ones. So right now some of you are thinking, okay Yank, great, but I'm living the squeeze. I can't save $500 a month. I don't have $500 a month. What exactly am I supposed to do with this information? That's the correct objection, and I want to answer it honestly rather than pretend it away. You're probably not going to outsave the squeeze. Almost nobody does. The daycare years are the daycare years, and no amount of budgeting turns $1,230 a month into zero. If you're 3 years into infant care and treading water, you're not failing. You're paying the single largest bill of your life at the exact moment your income is smallest. But here's what actually matters, and it will sound too small to be true. The difference between Marin and Derek was never $500 a month during the hard years. It was what happened to their money on the far side of the hard years, and whether the system to catch it was already built before the money showed up. You're not being asked to outsave your daycare bill. You're being asked to build the catcher now, while it's cheap, so that when your income finally clears the squeeze, it lands somewhere. Which brings us to the halving. Take $1,000 of your money and invest it at 30. Assume 7% after inflation, which is roughly the long-run real return of the American stock market over the last century. By 65, you have about $10,600 in today's purchasing power. Now invest that exact same $1,000 at 40 instead. Same fund, same market, same you. By 65 it's about $5,400. You lost half. Not by making a bad choice, but by making the right choice 10 years late. That's the halving, and it applies to every dollar you touch this decade. Now scale it to something that looks like your life. Marin puts away $500 a month from 30 to 40, then at 40 she stops completely, never contributes another dollar to that account as long as she lives. Total in, $60,000. Derek waits out the squeeze, starts at 40, and puts in $500 a month every month until 65 without missing one. Total in, $150,000. He contributes $90,000 more than she does, 2.5 times the money. He never panics, never sells, never misses. At 65, at 7%, she has about $495,000. He has about $245,000. The woman who quit wins by $90,000, having contributed $90,000 less. At 8%, the gap widens to about $196,000. At 10%, she finishes near $1.2 million and he finishes near $663,000. And it stops being a comparison and becomes a mugging. Now, I'm not telling you to stop saving at 40. Please don't do that. That would be a genuinely insane takeaway. What I'm telling you is that the dollars you put in during your 30s do structural work that nothing you do later replicates. They aren't the same dollars as the ones you'll save at 45. They only look the same on your statement. Which is why in your 30s specifically, your savings rate matters more than your returns. Say you have $20,000 invested. A spectacular year, 20%, earns you $4,000. Meanwhile, raising your own contribution by $300 a month earns you $3,600, guaranteed, no market risk, no research, no opinion required. Nearly the same number, except one of them needs the entire global economy to cooperate, and the other just needs you to open a website. This flips eventually. Once your balance is big enough, returns take over completely and your account develops a life of its own. But that crossover usually won't arrive until your second decade of saving. Right now, you are the engine, not the market. Which is why Marin spent almost no time picking investments, and Derek spent an enormous amount of it. Derek was optimizing. He had opinions about semiconductors, and to be fair to him, some of those opinions were correct. He was solving the wrong problem with real skill, which is one of the most expensive things you can do with a good brain. If you've ever spent a Saturday comparing expense ratios on accounts you're barely funding, you've met your own inner Derek. Now 3 pieces of standard advice that will hurt you specifically in this decade. Buy a house as soon as humanly possible. Look, homeownership does build wealth for a lot of people, and it may well build yours, but the version sold to you skips the arithmetic. Estimate your unrecoverable annual cost of owning at roughly 5% of the home's value, 1% property tax, 1% maintenance, 3% for the capital you tied up. If comparable rent costs you less than that per year, renting is genuinely cheaper, not morally worse, just cheaper. You're not failing at adulthood. You're doing division. Add transaction costs of 5 to 10% round trip, and the house you leave in 4 years isn't your investment. It's an expensive way to store your furniture. The typical seller now stays about 11 years, which is long enough for the math to work. 3 years isn't. Pay off every debt before you invest $1. The real rule is a threshold, not a slogan. If your rate beats what you'd reasonably earn investing, kill the debt. Your credit card's at 20-something%, obviously. Your used car loan averaging over 11%, absolutely. But your federal student loans are sitting near 6.4%, your mortgage near 6.7%, and the long-run real return on stocks is near 7%. Those numbers are touching, which means it depends on your bracket and your nerves, and anyone who tells you there's one universally correct answer is selling you something. And your side hustle will save you. Bankrate surveys this every year. The median side hustle earns $200 a month. The average is $885. There's your burrito room again, waving at you. 28% of people running one earn between $1 and $50 a month. Now, $200 a month invested for 30 years at 7% does become about $244,000, and that's real. But before you sell your weekends for it, go check whether your employer match is fully captured. Same money, 0 hours. I want to pause the math for a minute, because I think this next part is the actual video. Here's what the squeeze feels like from the inside, and I suspect some of you will recognize the sequence. January, the daycare center sends the annual rate letter. It's gone up $90 a month. You read it twice. Looking for the part where it's a mistake. March, you get the raise you've been working toward for 2 years. It's real, it's deserved, and by the time it clears payroll and taxes, it's worth about $340 a month, which is $150 more than the daycare increase already took. You don't feel richer. You feel exactly the same, which is somehow worse than feeling poorer, because at least poorer makes sense. June, the car needs something that costs $1,100, and you put it on the card, telling yourself you'll pay it off in 2 months. September, your dad calls, and it's not a normal call, and afterward you sit in the parking lot for a while. November, you open the retirement account for the first time since spring, see a number that's barely moved, and close the app. Roughly 37% of American adults couldn't cover a $400 emergency entirely in cash. That's not a discipline statistic. That's a structural one. You didn't fail a test. You were handed a schedule where the bill for having a life and the bill for building a future arrive inside the same 10 years. And then you were told the difference was your coffee order. It was never your coffee order. It was never going to be your coffee order. Now your third force, and this is the one that actually got Derek. Economists studying Canadian lottery data found that when a household won a prize roughly the size of a median annual income, their close neighbor's bankruptcy rate rose by about 6.6%. The neighbors won nothing. They just watched somebody buy visible things, cars, renovations, and the bankruptcies clustered around the visible assets, never the invisible ones. Nobody has ever gone broke copying a neighbor's sofa. So what wrecked those people wasn't their income. It was their line of sight. And you have one. It's in your pocket. It refreshes every 4 seconds, and it's showing you the highlight reel of everyone you went to school with. Your 30s are uniquely dangerous here because this is when your raises finally land. Economist David Deming found that the college wage premium roughly doubles across a career, from about 27% at 25 to about 60% at 55. More income arriving means more raw material for your line of sight to work with. It's not a coincidence that this is the decade your friends start renovating kitchens. So let me account for Derek properly, because I told you at the start that income wasn't the explanation, and I owe you that arithmetic. He outearned Marin by roughly $14,000 a year from 38 onward, over 22 years. That's a little over $300,000 gross, call it $220,000 after tax. And his savings rate never moved, not once. Every raise arrived, and every raise was absorbed at exactly the speed it arrived, into the bigger house and the newer cars and a life that quietly expanded to fit. That's your whole answer. His income advantage had a savings rate of 0, so it never became an asset. It became a lifestyle. And lifestyles don't compound. That's how the man who earned more finished with less, and it stops being a paradox the moment you follow where the money actually went. Which is worth sitting with, because it means your raise isn't the win you've been treating it as. Your raise is a test, and the line of sight is what grades it. So what do you actually do? 3 things, and none of them are clever. Capture your match first, because it's free and people leave it anyway. Roughly 1 in 4 employees doesn't contribute enough to get their full employer match, leaving about $1,336 a year on the table. Over 30 years at 7%, that foregone match compounds to roughly $126,000. That's a guaranteed 50 to 100% return skipped because the enrollment form was annoying. Stop trying to beat the market and start owning it. The SPIVA scorecard found that in 2025 about 79% of active large-cap managers underperformed the plain index you could have bought in 4 clicks. Over the 15 years ending in 2024, not one of 22 American equity categories had a majority of managers beat their benchmark. Not one. These are professionals with research teams and terminals, and they lose to a fund that does nothing. You're not going to outtrade them, and you don't have to, which means every hour Derek spent on semiconductors was an hour he paid for the privilege of losing to Marin's autopilot. And automate your raise before it ever touches your hands. Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi ran a program committing future pay increases to retirement savings in advance. Savings rates climbed from 3.5% to 13.5% over about 4 raises, and 78% of people stayed enrolled. Your take-home never drops. You're never asked to give anything up. You're just handing the decision to future you, who is considerably more reasonable and doesn't want tacos right now. And notice what that does to your line of sight. You can't spend money you never saw. Which brings me back to Derek and that month. Watch how ordinary it looks, because yours will look like this too. He was 34, new job, a good one, an $11,000 raise. In the chaos of onboarding, he accepted the default contribution rate instead of the one that captured his full match. Reasonable. You'd probably do the same thing. Everybody does. That's about $1,300 a year in free money, and it compounds to roughly $126,000 by 65. That same month, celebrating the raise, he financed a new car at about $770 a month instead of the used one at $530. That difference, $239 a month for 6 years, invested and left alone, would have been about $122,000 by 65. 2 decisions, 1 month, about $248,000. And not one of them felt like a decision at the time. Derek got serious at 45. Genuinely serious. $500 a month, every month, 20 straight years through 2 crashes, never flinched. That produced about $260,000. So 20 years of the exact discipline you're being told to have almost perfectly cancelled out one Tuesday afternoon when he was 34. And Marin's 15 minutes. At 31, she logged into her plan, moved her contribution up to her full match, and checked a box that raised it 1% every year automatically. Then she closed the laptop and didn't think about it again for 30 years. That's it. That's the entire difference between the two lives I opened this video with. She wasn't smarter than him, and she wasn't more disciplined than him. She was disciplined earlier about something smaller, at the exact moment it had the most leverage, which is where you're standing right now. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. This is arithmetic and a lot of time spent watching people hit the same wall. Your situation has variables I can't see from here. But if you take one thing from this video, take the boring one. Don't try to be brilliant this decade. Brilliance is expensive and unreliable, and usually just semiconductors. Go check your contribution rate this week. Check whether you're capturing the full match. 15 minutes, and it will outperform almost anything else you could do with the same afternoon. Derek didn't lose because he was lazy. He worked harder than you probably do, and he earned more than most of you will. And he lost anyway. He lost because he assumed his window would stay open a little longer. Windows don't announce themselves on the way down. Yours is open right now. That's the only genuinely good news in this entire video, and it's still true.